worry as much about that rolling wave in that injection mechanism because I don't have a wave to form. But what I do have to worry about is I still have to fill the metal up right up to that die cavity. And so you see a very similar process where we go at some slow speed to fill up all the injection channels, or the gates and runner system is the technical terms we use. And then once I get the metal all filled up in that injection system, then I go to that fast velocity to fill the casting very quickly. Now Ahmed has a question about will we get the presentation, and I believe that there's some way to get a hold of this presentation, although I'm just the technical guy who talks, and so I believe you'll have an email that'll come out shortly after that, shortly after this presentation that should be able to explain that. Chris asked a question about what are my thoughts on powder coating ZA3 or ZA8? Would it be best to attack porosity blemishes after powder coating temperatures? Or how could we best attack those porosity blemishes after powder coating? Powder coating is something that I know a lot of guys do and they can be somewhat successful at. Really what you're looking at in terms of the porosity blemishes, those are going to be a result of blistering or the entrapped air. And so you could look at vacuum as a way to try to help with that. In fact, I probably would actually turn you towards the diecastingdesign.org website where there's actually a fairly extensive discussion of the different coating processes that we can use on die castings. Generally, I'm hesitant to powder coat zinc, and the reason I'm hesitant to powder coat zinc is just because it's such a low temperature melting alloy that the temperatures I have to go to for powder coating can cause me some problems. So I think there's a lot of other coating systems out there that you could use that might be a little less aggressive to the zinc. However, I'd really direct you to the diecastingdesign.org website where you're going to get a lot more information on that than we're going to have time to cover in the subsequent webinars. Bill asks a question that he's not a die casting designer, and do we have recommended die casting design companies for his product? And Bill, I recommend you go to diecastingdesign.org or diecasting.org. And on both of those websites, which are run by NADCA, we actually have an area where you can search for designers of die castings. There's a couple of different ways you can go about doing that. You can look at tool builders, and you can go straight to tool builders and ask them to help you design your casting. You can also pick a die caster in your area. I'm not familiar with where you're located, but if you're located in, say, Colorado, in the Denver area, I'd just give the guys at Prestige a call and say, hey, I'm looking to design some die castings, but I'm not really a designer. Can you help me out? And that'll really help you make the very best casting. But we also do have a list of guys who do just standalone design of die castings, and you can search for those guys directly on the website. And then Sean actually asked a very interesting question about amorphous metal castings, where the metal viscosity is changing based on temperature, and he wants to know, is it really close to semi-solid casting, and it would be good to follow those rules rather than typical die casting metals. And Sean, I would tend to agree with you that since the viscosity is so dependent on temperature, you're really closer to semi-solid metal casting than to typical die casting. We've had a little bit of discussion about amorphous metals. There's some projects that are just now people are looking at die-castable metal, amorphous metals. Really, I think the only guys out there that do that is the Liquid Metal Technologies guys, which I'm sure you're aware. Their IP was bought up by Apple Computer, and so this might actually be a place where Apple might actually start pushing these amorphous metals. There's some rumors that may be happening in the near future. Now, Ahmed asks a follow-up question of that he's in the electronics industry, and how does die cast for miniature parts differ from metal in mold, just like plastic injection molded parts. I'm not 100% sure what you're asking, Ahmed, but if you look at how a miniature die